The auditorium was packed, every seat filled, every aisle buzzing with anticipation. The lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the crowd, a hush heavy with curiosity and excitement. Tonight wasn't just any event. It wasn't a typical talk show or a standard interview. It was a collision of worlds, a conversation that promised to challenge hearts and minds in ways no one expected. On one side of the stage stood Oprah Winfrey, the media icon whose voice had guided millions through triumphs, heartbreaks, and self-discovery. On the other side was Jonathan Roumie, the actor known for embodying faith in its purest, most human form, calm, sincere, and quietly powerful. The contrast was immediately striking. Oprah radiated confidence and charisma, a force of nature whose very presence commanded attention. She smiled, acknowledging the crowd, her eyes scanning thousands of faces hungry for insight, inspiration, and truth. Jonathan, by contrast, stepped lightly, his demeanor understated but grounded. There were no flashing lights in his eyes, no theatrical gestures, just a quiet sense of peace, as if he carried a calm that invited everyone around him to breathe a little slower, think a little deeper. As the conversation began, it became clear this wasn't about debate or confrontation. It was about exploration. About faith, hope, and the human experience in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain. Oprah spoke first, sharing stories from her life. Moments of doubt, moments of courage, moments when faith had been tested in ways she never expected. Her words were rich with wisdom, grounded in experience, yet vulnerable, as if she were letting the audience see behind the curtain of her public persona. Jonathan listened carefully, nodding, his gaze steady. When it was his turn, he didn't respond with grand statements or dramatic rhetoric. Instead, he spoke of belief, of the quiet power that comes from trust in something greater than oneself. He shared personal anecdotes, small yet profound, moments where faith had carried him through trials, offered clarity in confusion, and anchored him when life seemed unsteady. The audience leaned in, captivated. Some whispered to neighbors. Some reached for their phones to capture the words, knowing these were moments that couldn't be easily forgotten. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, a shift began. The energy in the room changed. This wasn't just a talk or a debate anymore. It was a meeting of hearts, a conversation that promised to leave a mark far deeper than anyone anticipated. As the conversation unfolded, the audience could feel the tension, but not the kind that comes from anger or confrontation. This was a tension born of truth, of ideas colliding with lived experience, of hearts opening to perspectives they hadn't considered before. Oprah leaned forward slightly, her elbows resting on the arm of her chair. "Faith isn't always easy," she said, her voice soft but powerful. "There are moments when life tests you, challenges everything you believe in. And sometimes, in those moments, we feel alone." Jonathan listened carefully. His hands rested lightly in his lap, his posture relaxed, but his presence was magnetic. When he spoke, it wasn't to rebut or impress, it was to illuminate. "You're right," he said. "Faith isn't a shield from pain, or a guarantee of answers. It's a way to navigate the unknown. It's what gives us courage when our own strength isn't enough, and hope when despair feels overwhelming." The room was silent, hanging on every word. There were nods in the front row, furrowed brows in the back, phones hovering mid-air as people captured the moment. What made this dialogue so gripping wasn't the fame of the speakers, it was the authenticity. Both Oprah and Jonathan shared personal stories that felt raw, unfiltered, human. Oprah spoke of moments from her youth, times she had questioned whether she could overcome poverty, self-doubt, and fear. "There were days I didn't believe in myself," she admitted. "Days I thought maybe life had passed me by. And yet, somehow, there was this quiet voice inside me, pushing me forward, reminding me that there was purpose, even if I couldn't see it yet." Her eyes glistened as she spoke, and the audience felt the weight of her vulnerability. Jonathan's response was calm, yet it carried the same emotional gravity. "Faith isn't about certainty," he said. "It's about trust. Trusting that even when the path is unclear, there is meaning. There is guidance. I remember a time when I felt completely lost, personally, spiritually, professionally. And yet, through prayer, reflection, and simply showing up every day, I found clarity I never could have forced on my own." The conversation deepened. Oprah pressed further, asking Jonathan how he reconciled doubt with unwavering belief. The answer wasn't simple, and that's what made it resonate. "Doubt isn't the enemy of faith," he explained. Doubt is the doorway to understanding. It's a reminder to question, to grow, to seek. Without doubt, faith becomes empty words. With doubt, faith becomes living, breathing guidance. A murmur ran through the audience. People exchanged glances as if confirming silently that they had never thought about faith in this way. The discussion wasn't just about religion or spirituality, it was about courage, resilience, and the invisible threads that connect human experience. Oprah shared another personal moment, one that brought tears to her eyes and a hush over the room. She spoke of loss, of the death of a loved one, and the moments of despair that followed. "I prayed," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "But I didn't hear an answer. I didn't feel comfort. And yet, slowly, I realized that faith isn't always about receiving signs. Sometimes it's about holding on when there's nothing else to hold on to." Jonathan nodded, his expression solemn. "Exactly," he said. "Faith isn't a guarantee. It's the courage to continue when there's no proof, when all the world seems uncertain. It's the quiet strength that carries us forward, even when we feel like giving up." By this point, the emotional weight in the room was palpable. The audience was no longer passive observers, they were participants in an intimate, sacred exchange. People wiped their eyes, whispered to neighbors, leaned forward in rapt attention. The conversation had moved beyond celebrity or performance. It had become a mirror, reflecting struggles and hopes that every person in that room carried with them. Then came a turning point. Jonathan shared a deeply personal story, a moment of failure and redemption that no one could have predicted. He spoke of doubt, of shame, of feeling unworthy. And then he spoke of faith, not as a concept, but as a lifeline. "There was a day I thought I had lost everything," he said quietly. "And yet, I woke up. I prayed. I kept moving. And slowly, things fell into place in ways I couldn't have imagined. That's the power of faith. It doesn't always give you what you want, but it gives you what you need." The audience was silent. Even the usual whispers and coughs had disappeared. There was only the weight of the moment, the shared human experience, and the profound realization that they were witnessing something rare, a conversation about life, hope, and belief, stripped of pretense, fame, and ego. Oprah leaned back, tears glinting in her eyes. She smiled, a mixture of admiration and humility. "You've reminded me of something I almost forgot," she said. "Faith is about showing up. Even when it's hard. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when we're scared. And that courage, that quiet, consistent courage, changes everything." Jonathan smiled faintly, nodding. "Faith isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. But when it's lived authentically, it has a voice that can move hearts, change minds, and touch souls, even in ways we don't expect." And in that moment, the audience realized that this wasn't just a debate. It was a gift, a conversation that would linger in their hearts long after the lights dimmed, a dialogue that reminded them of the quiet power of belief, courage, and the human spirit. The room was silent, but it wasn't the quiet of boredom or disinterest. It was a deep, expectant silence, like the hush of a forest before a storm, heavy with emotion and anticipation. People leaned forward in their seats, not wanting to miss a single word, a single gesture, a single pause. They had come expecting a conversation, a debate perhaps, but what they were witnessing was something far greater, a revelation. A young man near the front of the auditorium wiped his eyes, unable to hide the tears welling up. "I didn't expect this," he whispered to the person next to him. It's like they're speaking directly to my heart." Around him, others nodded, some holding hands with loved ones, others sitting alone, silently moved. The energy in the room was subtle yet undeniable. Oprah, usually the commanding voice of millions, had become a participant in the audience's shared vulnerability. Her own composure had softened, and for the first time, the public icon appeared as just another human being, carrying the weight of her own experiences, just like everyone else. Jonathan's words, calm, deliberate, and sincere, had found a way into the hearts of thousands, bridging gaps that no speech, no performance, could have achieved. Then came the moment that would be remembered long after the lights dimmed. Jonathan shared a story of a personal struggle, a time when he had faced a choice between fear and courage, between despair and hope. "I remember feeling completely broken," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I had nothing left to give, nothing left to hope for. And yet, Somehow, a quiet strength guided me. I didn't see it clearly at first, but it was there. And it reminded me that faith isn't about perfection, it's about perseverance, about continuing even when everything seems impossible. A collective breath seemed to escape the audience at that moment. Faces that had been stoic, polite, or curious were now wet with tears, glistening under the stage lights. People who had come expecting a debate or entertainment were instead facing something deeply personal, almost sacred. Phones were forgotten mid-air, whispers turned into quiet sobs. Oprah's eyes shimmered as she nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Her voice cracked slightly as she said, "It's moments like these that remind me why faith matters. Not because it gives us answers, but because it teaches us endurance, courage, and hope, even when the world seems against us." A woman in the second row buried her face in her hands, and a man behind her leaned forward, gripping the edge of the seat as if holding onto the truth Jonathan had just spoken. "I've never thought about it like that," one whispered. "I always thought faith had to be big, loud, obvious. But this is real. This is quiet strength." Jonathan continued, sharing a story of someone he had met, a stranger who had lost everything yet kept believing in the goodness of life. "Faith doesn't always change circumstances," he said. "Sometimes it changes us. It reminds us to stay human, to stay compassionate, to stay resilient. And sometimes, that's enough to create a ripple that reaches farther than we could ever imagine." The tension in the room began to transform into an almost tangible unity. Strangers turned to each other, silently acknowledging the shared experience. Eyes met. Hands touched. Hearts opened. The debate had evolved into a communion, a collective acknowledgement of the vulnerability and strength that reside in every person, regardless of fame, status, or background. At one point, Oprah leaned forward, placing a hand over her heart. "I've interviewed countless people," she said, her voice softer than usual, "but rarely do I leave feeling this, connected. This is more than a conversation. This is a reminder that our stories, our struggles, our faith, they matter. They are heard. They are felt. And they can change lives." Jonathan smiled faintly, the faintest curve of gratitude and acknowledgement. "Faith is not a performance," he said. "It doesn't seek applause or recognition. It asks only that we stay true, that we show up, that we care, for ourselves, for each other, for the world." As the final minutes of the conversation approached, the auditorium was thick with emotion. There was no debate left, no contest, no argument. Only understanding, empathy, and a profound sense of shared humanity. Tears streamed freely across faces, young and old, men and women, believers and skeptics alike. Phones captured some of it, but no recording could truly capture what was happening in the hearts of thousands. And then, in a quiet, almost imperceptible moment, the room collectively exhaled. The tension dissolved into awe, gratitude, and reflection. The audience had been moved, not by spectacle or fame, but by truth, vulnerability, and the courage to speak openly about faith, hope, and perseverance. As the applause began, tentative at first, then swelling into a wave that filled the auditorium, Jonathan and Oprah shared a look, one of mutual respect, understanding, and recognition of the impact their words had created. It wasn't about who spoke louder, who was wiser, or who had more experience. It was about connection, authenticity, and the quiet, unshakable power of faith lived honestly. In that moment, the debate ended not with a winner, but with transformation. Hearts had been opened, lives touched, and an invisible thread had been woven, connecting strangers through the shared experience of vulnerability, courage, and hope. And everyone in that room knew, the conversation they had just witnessed would stay with them forever. As the applause faded, a stillness settled over the auditorium. Not the silence of empty space, but the calm after an emotional storm, a pause for reflection, as if every person present was taking a moment to absorb what they had just experienced. The lights were dim, the stage quiet, yet the weight of the conversation lingered in the air, thick and undeniable. This wasn't a performance that could be replayed or forgotten. It was an imprint, a lasting echo in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. Oprah and Jonathan remained seated, facing each other, their expressions softened by emotion. For a moment, the distinction between celebrity and ordinary human vanished entirely. Here were two individuals who had shared truths, vulnerabilities, and experiences so deeply personal that the audience couldn't help but feel intimately connected. It was more than a dialogue. It was a mirror reflecting the struggles, hopes, and faith that reside within all of us. Jonathan spoke first, his voice calm yet resonant, cutting through the lingering silence. Faith, he said, isn't about certainty. It's not a guarantee that life will be easy or that suffering will be avoided. Faith is about showing up every day, even when we're unsure. It's about trusting that our actions, our intentions, and our care for others create ripples, even when we cannot see them. The audience absorbed every word. Some leaned back, breathing slowly as if exhaling a tension they hadn't realized they were holding. Others sat forward, eyes fixed, fully present in the moment, hearts open and receptive. There was no cheering, no shouting, no need for spectacle. The energy was quiet but powerful, a shared recognition that something rare and transformative had occurred. Oprah's voice followed, soft yet unmistakably commanding. What I've learned tonight, she said, is that faith is not about being perfect. It's about being human. It's about courage, about hope, about the choices we make when life doesn't go according to plan. And it's about recognizing that each of us carries within us the power to lift others, to inspire others, and to live authentically, even when it's hard. Jonathan nodded, his gaze sweeping the room, connecting with people in a way that felt intimate despite the thousands in attendance. We often look for grand gestures, for visible signs of faith, success, or hope. But the true impact of belief is often quiet, invisible, and subtle. It shows up in the way we treat strangers, the way we forgive ourselves, the way we keep moving forward when everything seems uncertain. That is the power that truly matters. The audience was silent again, not from lack of interest, but from the gravity of realization. The applause that had followed the earlier stories was replaced by something quieter, deeper, a collective acknowledgement of shared humanity, of vulnerability embraced, of faith lived authentically. Tears glistened on faces, some wiped away with tissue or sleeves, others left untouched, a testament to the rawness of the experience. Oprah gestured to Jonathan with a warm, genuine smile. Thank you for reminding me, and all of us, that life's true strength isn't in what we achieve or accumulate. It's in how we show up. It's in how we care. It's in how we stay resilient, compassionate, and honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Jonathan returned the smile, a faint curve of humility and gratitude. And thank you, he said, for reminding everyone here that faith is not just a private journey. It's something we live through our actions, our choices, and our interactions with others. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable, and kind enough to extend that courage to those around us. As the conversation drew to a close, the auditorium slowly began to stir. Some stood, still silent, as if hesitant to break the spell. Others whispered to neighbors, sharing insights, revelations, or personal reflections. The energy was different from when the event began, softer, deeper, and charged with understanding. People weren't just leaving a stage or a debate. They were carrying a lesson, a feeling, a spark that had been ignited within them. Outside the auditorium, conversations bubbled over into the lobby. Strangers discussed their own doubts, fears, and moments of courage. A young woman shared with her friend how Jonathan's words had shifted her perspective on her own struggles. A man reflected on Oprah's stories, realizing that resilience and hope often arise not from certainty, but from persistence and trust. The ripple effect had begun, extending far beyond the walls of the building, reaching into lives in ways both subtle and profound. And in the quiet aftermath, one truth remained undeniable. The debate hadn't been about who was right or wrong. It wasn't about celebrity, status, or accolades. It was about humanity. About faith as a lived experience, a quiet force that shapes lives, connects people, and transforms hearts. It was a reminder that strength and courage aren't always loud, that hope often thrives in the unseen, and that the most powerful lessons are sometimes the simplest. A story told honestly, a moment shared sincerely, a heart opened fully. As the lights finally dimmed, leaving the stage empty, the lesson lingered. True faith is not performance. True courage is not spectacle. And true impact is not measured in applause or recognition, but in the hearts touched, the lives changed, and the quiet ripples that extend far beyond what anyone can see. In that room, thousands of hearts had been moved, thousands of minds challenged, and thousands of souls reminded that even in the most uncertain moments, hope, compassion, and faith can carry us forward, if we only have the courage to embrace them. As the auditorium emptied and the echoes of applause faded into memory, the weight of the conversation lingered like a soft, persistent hum. People walked out slowly, some still wiping away tears, others clutching notebooks or phones, their hands trembling slightly as if trying to hold on to the wisdom they had just witnessed. The debate was over, yet its impact was only beginning. It had been more than a discussion between Jonathan Roumie and Oprah Winfrey. It had been a mirror reflecting humanity at its most authentic, vulnerable, and courageous. In the quiet that followed, one lesson emerged with crystalline clarity. Faith is not a performance. It doesn't demand recognition, applause, or validation. Faith is lived quietly, in the choices we make when no one is watching. It is perseverance when the world seems indifferent, kindness when it is easier to ignore, and hope when despair feels overwhelming. In every story shared, every personal experience revealed, the audience had glimpsed this truth. They had seen that faith, in its purest form, is less about certainty and more about commitment. Commitment to oneself, to others, and to something greater than the self. Oprah and Jonathan had shown them that courage and vulnerability are inseparable. Strength is not defined by the absence of fear, but by the decision to act in spite of it. Tears shed in that auditorium were not signs of weakness. They were affirmations of humanity, acknowledgments of the struggles and triumphs that define each person's journey. As one woman whispered to her friend while leaving, "I've never felt so seen in my life." It was clear that the power of authentic dialogue could reach farther than fame, influence, or even eloquence. Jonathan's calm, grounded presence reminded everyone that faith doesn't have to be loud to be transformative. A quiet voice, spoken with sincerity and truth, can resonate more powerfully than 1,000 speeches. And Oprah's willingness to share her own vulnerabilities demonstrated that even those who appear invincible carry doubts, fears, and moments of fragility. Together, they had created a space where audience members could recognize the universality of their experiences, where stories of personal struggle and hope intertwined, revealing that no one is truly alone in their challenges. The moral was simple, yet profound. Respect, empathy, and humility are the truest measures of strength. Faith, courage, and hope are not achievements to be displayed, but qualities to be lived. They manifest in everyday acts, listening to someone's story, offering a hand when it is needed, speaking truth in love, and choosing compassion over judgment. These are the quiet forces that shape lives, communities, and the world itself. In that sense, the debate had not ended. It had only just begun, rippling outward into the lives of every person who had been present, and through them, into the broader world. As the audience dispersed into the night, the final moments of reflection lingered in the air. Phones were put away, conversations continued, but most importantly, hearts were touched. People walked with new awareness, carrying the message that faith is not about perfection, status, or accolades. It is about showing up, consistently, authentically, and courageously. It is about connection, about seeing the humanity in others, and about allowing oneself to be seen in return. Jonathan and Oprah left the stage quietly, side by side, a symbolic gesture of shared purpose. There was no fanfare, no grand exit, only the steady certainty that they had offered something far more enduring than entertainment or debate. They had offered understanding. They had offered perspective. And they had offered an invitation to live with intention, compassion, and faith, even in the small, unseen moments of everyday life. And so, the auditorium emptied, but the lesson remained. True impact is measured not in applause, recognition, or celebrity, but in the hearts touched, the lives changed, and the quiet ripples of hope and faith that extend far beyond what we can see. The conversation between Jonathan Roumie and Oprah Winfrey had reminded every person present that courage, humility, and authentic faith have the power to transform, not through spectacle, but through quiet, persistent presence. In a world often obsessed with visibility and validation, this debate was a gentle yet profound reminder. The most meaningful change begins not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent acts of faith, kindness, and courage. True strength lies in empathy, vulnerability, and authenticity. And for anyone who witnessed that stage that day, the message was clear. Carry faith in your heart, live it in your actions, and never underestimate the quiet power of your presence. And as the night settled, leaving the city lights twinkling in the distance, one truth lingered: the most powerful moments in life are not always loud. They are quiet, deeply human, and capable of touching the soul in ways words alone can barely capture. Days after the debate, the auditorium was empty, but the echoes of what had occurred there continued to resonate far beyond its walls. Audience members shared their experiences on social media, in emails, and in conversations with friends and family. Videos of the discussion went viral, not because of celebrity, but because of truth, raw, human, and unfiltered. People who had once doubted the power of faith or questioned its relevance in modern life now found themselves reconsidering, reflecting, and, in many cases, reshaping the way they approached their own beliefs. One young man wrote online, "I've never felt so seen. Their words didn't preach at me, they mirrored my struggles, my doubts, my hopes. And for the first time, I feel like I can face my fears with courage." Another woman shared a video of herself wiping away tears, explaining that Jonathan's calm sincerity had reminded her of her late grandmother, who had always carried faith quietly but powerfully, without ever needing acknowledgement. Thousands of similar stories flooded in, creating a ripple effect that even the speakers could scarcely imagine. Jonathan and Oprah watched some of these responses together in a quiet room after the event. There was a soft, unspoken acknowledgement between them. The impact wasn't theirs to claim, it belonged to the people whose hearts had been stirred. "It's incredible," Oprah said, her voice low, almost in awe. "We didn't just have a conversation. We created a space for people to see their own faith reflected back at them." Jonathan nodded, smiling faintly. "That's the beauty of authenticity. When you speak truthfully, the ripples go farther than you could ever plan. It changes more than the moment, it changes perspectives, hearts, and sometimes even lives." And that was precisely what made this debate different from any other event or interview. It was not a performance, not a spectacle, and not a lesson imposed from above. It was a shared experience, a dialogue that reminded everyone, speakers and audience alike, that faith, courage, and hope are not measured by visible achievements or accolades, but by the quiet ways in which they shape our lives and the lives of others. People began to act on what they had learned. Small gestures multiplied. Friends reached out to friends. Strangers offered help to strangers. Communities shared moments of reflection and prayer. Those who had been silently struggling with fear or doubt found courage to speak, to share, and to act. The debate had sparked more than conversation. It had sparked transformation, a subtle but undeniable force that traveled far beyond the auditorium. For Jonathan, the experience reaffirmed a truth he had long held. The quiet life of integrity, faith, and compassion has the power to inspire far more than grand gestures ever could. For Oprah, it reminded her that even someone with a global platform can continue to learn, grow, and be moved by humility, sincerity, and shared humanity. Together, their exchange had become more than a debate. It had become a living lesson in what it means to carry faith with courage, humility, and love. And yet, perhaps the most profound impact was the reminder that faith is personal, yet communal, private, yet universally human. It is not about proving oneself, converting others, or performing for recognition. It is about showing up, consistently, sincerely, and compassionately. It is about creating ripples that may never be fully seen but are nonetheless felt deeply. In a world that often emphasizes noise, visibility, and spectacle, the debate was a quiet yet powerful testament to the enduring strength of authenticity, empathy, and courage. The final lesson of that day, and the reason it would be remembered for years, was simple. The most profound moments in life are often quiet, subtle, and unexpected. They do not demand attention or accolades, yet they leave lasting marks on hearts and minds. They remind us of our shared humanity, the power of compassion, and the courage inherent in choosing hope when everything seems uncertain. And above all, they show us that faith, when lived authentically, has the ability to transform lives far beyond the stage on which it is spoken. As the city returned to its normal rhythm and the auditorium sat empty, the ripple effect continued, unseen by most but undeniable. In homes, workplaces, schools, and quiet moments of reflection, people carry the messages of that night. That courage is silent, that faith is lived in action, and that hope can be found even in the smallest, quietest gestures. The debate had ended, but its impact had only just begun, a testament to the enduring, transformative power of truth, vulnerability, and authentic human connection. And in the quiet aftermath, one universal truth remained clear. The world is changed not only by grand acts but by the consistent, quiet presence of people who live with courage, compassion, and unwavering faith. That night, Jonathan Roumie and Oprah Winfrey reminded everyone that the smallest, most sincere acts can ripple through the world, leaving lasting impressions on hearts, minds, and souls. The lights had long dimmed in the auditorium, and the crowd had dispersed into the city night. But the echoes of the conversation between Jonathan Roumie and Oprah Winfrey lingered, not in sound, but in hearts. People carried something intangible with them, a sense of reflection, humility, and inspiration that would remain long after the applause had faded. The debate was over, But its lesson was timeless. Respect, faith, and compassion are the true measures of strength. Faith, as Jonathan had emphasized, is not about grand gestures or public recognition. It is quiet, personal, and persistent. It manifests in the choices we make when no one is watching, the small acts of kindness, the courage to persevere, and the decision to hope even when life feels uncertain. The audience had seen, through stories both personal and universal, that faith is lived, not performed. It is a force that shapes not just individual lives, but the collective human experience. Oprah's reflections had reinforced the same truth. Vulnerability is not weakness, but power. The courage to share doubts, fears, and personal struggles opens a space for others to do the same. In witnessing someone speak openly about their humanity, the audience was reminded that empathy and understanding are far stronger than judgment and ego. True influence is not measured in fame, accolades, or social media metrics, but in the ability to move hearts and inspire change quietly yet profoundly. The moral of the debate was clear. Life's most meaningful moments come not from spectacle or recognition, but from authentic connection. When we approach others with respect, when we listen without judgment, and when we lead with humility, we create ripples of impact that extend far beyond what we can see. Courage is not always loud. Faith does not always announce itself. And hope is not always visible. Yet together, they form the foundation of lives well lived. Those in the audience carried this lesson into their own lives. Some reached out to loved ones they had neglected. Others found the courage to speak their truth or embrace their own faith, even in private or quiet ways. Small acts multiplied, like unseen ripples spreading across water, touching lives in ways the speakers themselves could never fully measure. This was the true power of the conversation. It reminded people that what we do daily, quietly, sincerely, and intentionally, can change the world more than any grand gesture ever could. Jonathan and Oprah had created more than a debate. They had created a living lesson in humility, courage, and hope. Their dialogue demonstrated that true power is not performance, but presence. True respect is not shown only to those in positions of influence, but to everyone, especially those whose voices are quiet, whose struggles are unseen, and whose faith is private. And true strength lies in living authentically, leading with empathy, and choosing kindness, even when it's difficult. In the end, the audience left not with answers to every question, but with a deeper awareness of what matters most: connection, compassion, and courage. The debate had been a mirror, reflecting the universal truths of human experience, and it had invited everyone to look within themselves, to examine how they carry faith, hope, and kindness in their own lives. The ultimate takeaway was simple yet profound. Respect is timeless, faith is transformative, and humility is real power. Life will test all of us, in moments of doubt, pain, and uncertainty. But when we live with integrity, empathy, and courage, we leave an impact far greater than fame, fortune, or recognition ever could. The conversation between Jonathan Roumie and Oprah Winfrey was a reminder that true strength is silent, true influence is lived, and true hope can change lives, one quiet act at a time. And as people continued to reflect on that night, one universal truth became undeniable. The world is shaped not by grand gestures, but by consistent, heartfelt actions, guided by faith, respect, and love.